delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
All right, welcome back to it on a Free-for-All Friday. By the way, if you don't have the number, well, first of all, what's wrong with you? And second of all, if you don't have the number, here it is. 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. If you want to join the conversation on the Common Sense Hotline coming up, and you might after this. Michael Tanner's our next guest from the Cato Institute, a senior fellow there. He heads research into a variety of policies with a particular emphasis on poverty, social welfare, healthcare reform, things of that nature. And as you look at the, whoever the next president's going to be, there's just a pile of problems there. No question about it. Michael Tanner, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's a real pleasure to be with you this morning.
I'm glad to have you. And I look at some of the articles that you've written before, and I was taken by a couple of the titles. How Big Government Conservatism Brought Down the Republican Revolution. I couldn't agree more. The Poverty of Welfare, Helping Others in a Civil Society, which you must do, but whenever you do, other conservatives criticize you. Well, you're for welfare. Well, if somebody can't help themselves, you are morally obligated to help them. So I like the point of view that you're coming from. But let's talk about the next president. A sea of troubles, you say in a recent article. Tell me about that.
Well, what concerns me is that so much of the campaign so far has been dominated by triviality, whether it's personal attacks or the size of the candidate's hands or whatever it might be that we've been talking about out there. And we're sort of ignoring the fact that regardless of who gets elected this November, when they get to office, they're going to face very big problems, ranging from war and peace to the economy and jobs to the growing deficit and debt that we're facing, and that we're really not pressing any of these candidates on how they're going to solve these problems.
Yeah, we're not in some cases we're getting to some policy here and there, but you're right, it's bits and pieces here and there. It's certainly not the norm because the media sits there and complains about, what size gloves people have to wear, if you will. But then they continue right back down that road, asking the same sorts of silly questions. And we saw it yesterday. I mean, I get the whole thing with Chris Matthews getting Donald Trump to talk about abortion and so forth. It's a gotcha moment. Okay. But abortion isn't going to change in America. And frankly, to me, I have my opinions about abortion, but I don't talk about it much because it's a waste of time. It's been settled law, like it or not, since 1973, and we have bigger problems to deal with, is my opinion.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, take, for example, the deficit. It has been going down for the last several years. It hit a low point last year, so it's sort of fallen off the radar screen, but it's actually risen by about $120 billion this year, and it's on its way back up. The CBO says that we will be back to trillion-dollar deficits every year by 2022. That's just 6 years from now. And yet I don't hear any real good plans that are being talked about out there on either side of the aisle right now about how we're going to rein in federal spending.
It's actually worse than that in some regards if you look at it. 10 years from now, if nothing changes, the third biggest item on the federal budget each year will be just the interest on the money we owe to the rest of the world. We are a debtor nation. We are broke. We can't pay our bills at some point in the future unless we get it together. And like you say, nobody's even talking about how to trim it back because every time you do, oh, my God, we can't get rid of this or that, and it's a victim. Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely right, because every program that's out there is popular with somebody. That's why the programs exist. And that means that if you're going to cut spending, you're going to make somebody unhappy. In an election year, nobody wants to do that. People, for example, talk about how they're going to cut fraud, waste, and abuse, which we've been trying to cut since at least Jimmy Carter invented that phrase. The big money is entitlements. It's Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are more than half of all federal spending, and yet we have candidates on both sides who say that they're off limits. We're not going to touch them. We're not going to reform those programs.
And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't work that way. And the thing I say about Social Security, there's a couple of $1 trillion that have been, escorted away to other projects, even though Americans did pay into the program. And there's a couple $1 trillion missing. Social Security is not an entitlement program the way I look at it. It's a program it's insurance. We paid our premiums. We continue to pay our premiums, if you will. And the government, a lot of those folks that we trusted with our money, well, we were fools to trust these people, frankly.
Well, that's generally right. I mean, it's entitlement in the sense that it's automatic spending. What it means is it's not subject to annual appropriation. But But aside from that, the money's gone. We can argue about what the money should have been done with, or should they have saved that money in some way, but it's gone, and the federal government doesn't have its own money. So the only way it's going to get the couple of $1 trillion back is by raising taxes on people or cutting other spending or borrowing the money. I mean, the fact is it's not there.
All right, so where do we cut from? Well, give me some ideas here. Let's work on that. Where could we honestly cut? And I don't care if people's feelings get hurt. There's got to be, I mean, me honestly, I look at around the world and I say, we have 190 military bases around the world. Yes, they're all nice to have, but do we really need them all in a day and age when we can have a kid with a big gulp sitting in South Dakota driving a drone remotely into a terrorist camp on the other side of the world? I think we could probably pare back a little bit and be okay. Some people say, well, that's crazy in the age of terrorism. 190 bases, that's where I would start, potentially. Where would you start?
Well, that's certainly a good spot. We really need to ask, is every American military mission worth the lives and treasure that we're going to be dedicating to it? We're involved in conflicts all across the world, from Somalia to Uganda and the Middle East, and then into Africa. We have 60 some odd, as you said, 180 odd military bases, countries that we're involved in. Are they all worth the money and lives that we're going to be spending on them?
Well, and you hear people, so one of the candidates in particular says, South Korea is a wealthy country. Why are we paying to defend them anymore? Shouldn't they take care of their own bill? What about Japan? Japan's wealthy. In fact, Japan owns our debt. Why are we paying to defend Japan? I mean, there's some legitimacy there. I would contend whether he's right about other things. He's right about that.
Well, absolutely. South Korea has a gross domestic product that's something like 20 times greater than North Korea. The idea that North Korea is militarily stronger is silly. South Korea basically free rides. The same with, for that candidate, correct, in terms of NATO, we bear a disproportionate share of the cost, which means we basically prop up the welfare states of Europe with our spending. That's
also true. And then we prop up the rest of the welfare states of the world with our spending on the United Nations, which, of course, we have housed in New York. But as a result of that, I think we pick up about 90% of the bill for that entire operation.
Well, that's right. And
aren't we nice?
Bank, of course, and the IMF. I mean, we spend on. Now, we should also note that all American foreign aid together is 1% of federal spending. So, again, you're not going to get there by cutting these usual suspects. You've got to go where the big money is, and that's, say, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and interest on the debt are about 60% of all federal spending.
Yeah, well, you got to get there somewhere. We got like 20 seconds here, but let me ask you this. Would a balanced budget amendment or a mandatory balanced budget get us there or not?
Well, a balanced budget spending limitation amendment would. If you just balance the budget, it's an invitation to raise taxes.
Fine. Are we too far gone?
No, but we've got a very small window to act.
Yeah, I think the conversation which somebody just chimed in on says the real conversation has to be between general welfare and handouts and specific welfare for specific needs, and that might be a conversation to have. I appreciate it. I wish we had more time, Michael Tanner. Thank you so much.
Anytime.
Michael Tanner from the Cato Institute here on a Free for All Friday edition of the Steve Gruber Show. What are your thoughts? About welfare? Is it for lazy people or the people that need it? I mean, this is the conversation that happens. Well, those people are just lazy. Not always. In a civilized society, there is a place for welfare to help those that can't help themselves. But as you know and I know, there is a tremendous amount of abuse. It's the Steve Gruber Show.
Come on. Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
All righty. I didn't write it down, Alex. That's what I needed. Sam on the hotline in Grand Rapids. Sam, welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning. I was going to agree that entitlements are really where the savings have to come from. Social Security, the people that have paid into Social Security and are now collecting it, are collecting far more than they ever put into it. And that's one of the reasons Social Security is in such dire straits.
Well, there's another reason
and
for
the fact that there's so fewer people paying into it today than there were when it started.
Well, Sam, you also have to understand that we were lied to from the beginning. Social Security was supposed to be supplemental to whatever you had in the end, and now it's supposed to be a retirement program, and it wasn't supposed to do this and that and everything else. And, of course, what it was really supposed to do was secure votes for the Democratic Party, which it has since the 1930s. And I appreciate you checking in. I'd talk more, but I got to get to my next guest. The hotline number is 888-900-9966. He's exactly right, by the way, Sam is. Let's see. Christian Hertenstein is from Americans for Prosperity. And Christian, welcome to the program, first of all.
Thanks, Steve.
And I appreciate that we saw this story, Ivy and I did. We said, you know what, we got to do this. I did this story a year ago or more about you've got hairdressers out there, if you will, black women that do cornrows and so forth. It's traditional or natural hair styling and so forth. And in several states, these women were being forced out of business because the government was coming along and saying, you can't do that. You don't have a cosmetology license. And they're like, what do you mean? So they would look at cosmetology schools where you had 1,500 or 1,600 hours of instruction that would cost thousands and thousands of dollars. And not 1 minute was spent on traditional hair braiding and so forth. Here are women out there, primarily in black communities around America, that have created businesses, have created jobs. They want to go to work. They don't want to hand out or welfare. They just want to make some money. And the government's stepping on their dream every step of the way. Am I on the right track?
No, you're right there. We have it's very interesting. So a lot of the folks in this community that perform African or natural style hair braiding, as it's called, are immigrants from other countries that are here legally. They're just trying to make a better life for themselves. And in the case of a couple of the folks that we spoke with in Kentucky, when someone is unhappy with their services, they'll walk out and not pay these women because their business is not licensed here. And for them to get a license, they have to go to cosmetology school. They have to undergo a 6-month internship that will never even teach them about hair braiding, their actual craft or profession. So we partnered with the Institute for Justice to find a way to get some of this red tape cut so that people actually have a fulfilling profession.
Well, here's something I want to touch on, because the bigger story is this. And I, first of all, let these women braid hair however they want. They're creating businesses. They're creating jobs. They're creating economic activity. They're not bothering anyone. And I can assure you, and you've seen this, the work is intricate. The work is incredible what they do. And the women that are good at this, and then maybe some guys too, primarily I've seen women, the work that they do is incredible and intricate and difficult and time-consuming. I mean, it's artwork is what it is. It's flat-out artwork, and just leave them alone. But here's the problem. I just read a stat here. Maybe you can help me with this, Christian, that 50 years ago in America, give or take, about 5% of the people in America that went to work had to have a license to have a job. And those were accountants and architects and doctors or whatnot. Today, that number is better than 10 times that. The people that go to work in America today, whether you're braiding hair or mowing lawns or laying brick or whatever the hell you're doing, everybody's got to have a license. And all that is a money grab by the government to interfere with commerce. And I find it repulsive. And so we need to push back, not just on the hair. We need to let people go to work. Get all these stupid regulations and all these little certificates and your license here and your license. Enough of that. Let people go to work uninhibited. That's my belief.
Steve, you're right on the money there. What a lot of groups like ours are working on right now are removing barriers to opportunity for people that are trying to get to work. In Kentucky, for example, 27 out of 102 moderate income occupations require a license. They have the 15th most burdensome licensing laws in the country.
In Kentucky?
That's just in Kentucky. But what you'll find is that these licenses are all over the place. But it would be dishonest to only blame government. You have this unholy alliance here of crony interests pairing up with government to do it. So what will happen is one group will come in and create an economic rent on their profession. and then use government to keep competition out.
So I'm not picking on the people that cut my hair. I love the folks that cut my hair, but they, I go to a giant salon type place, right, locally here, and they probably have 50 people cutting hair, but they do a heck of a job. They're famous, been around a long time. Fine. But you're saying groups like that will then say, well, listen, we're going to need to license other because there's other people out there that aren't doing the work that we do. So they get together with their local politicians and say, you know what, we can't have hacks out there. We need to have a regulation here. We need to have a license. And so then they ended up putting a license into their own industry to protect themselves with their friends that have been elected. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what happens. And so as we were trying to move this legislation in Kentucky to unlicensed hair braiders, one member introduced an amendment at the last minute. Now, let me just give you a little backstory here. The legislation passed the Kentucky Senate unanimously, overwhelming bipartisan support. It goes through its House committee, gets out unanimously, overwhelming bipartisan support. And then it gets to the floor, and for the first time we hear someone has a problem with it, and we find out late at night because they attach an amendment. Now, the amendment... Now,
Christian, I want you to hold that thought right there. You've laid the grounds for it. We have to hit a break here.
Okay.
But we're going to come back after the break, and you'll have about 2 minutes to sum this up, because we need to get people back to work in America. We need to get obstacles out of the way. And silly licensing and regulations and certificates and stuff for people that are, mowing a lawn or cutting hair. Come on. Let's get back to work in America. Hold on, Christian. We'll be right back right here on the Steve Gruber Show. Real quickly now, back with with Michael Tanner, Christian Hertenstein. I'm going to get this right. It's one of those days. I'm just a little bit out of sorts. Christian, let's finish this conversation about getting this law passed in Kentucky. Go ahead.
Okay, so the amendment comes up, and the amendment would require that hair braiders pay a $1,500 fee for a license, and it would require U.S. citizenship to perform hair braiding. But what was even more interesting was that the member who filed the amendment, his wife just also happens to be the chairwoman of the State Board of Cosmetology.
Yeah, how convenient,
Right? How convenient. And all of this is to say...
And who was this guy? Is this Republican or Democrat? What do we got here?
He was a Democrat.
Weasel is what it is. If I had guessed, I'd have guessed it was a Republican based on what you had told me, right? About it has to be an American citizen, because that's the kind of thing that, gets, Republicans are racist and blah, 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 blah. This case, it was a Democrat blocking out for his wife, trying to keep people. Anyhow, go on.
But what we find is this is happening on both sides of the aisle. And
sure
so what we're really focused on is trying to work with lawmakers to see opportunity that we can go in and actually make it easy for people to work. It doesn't sound like a complicated idea. I was just looking at Michigan. Do you know 42 out of 102 moderate income occupations are licensed in Michigan?
I know.
And you have the 21 most burdensome licensing laws.
It's terrible. Yeah, here's a funny thing. I've learned that if you're laying tile, you have to be licensed. But if you're laying carpet, you're good to go. See, and it doesn't even make any sense. Christian, I got to run. It's silly, but I want to talk about this more in the future. When you come back, do some homework for us on Michigan. Find out what some of the more egregious, oversteps are with these regulations and these silly licenses, which is nothing more than a damn tax on people that want to go to work, just like you pointed out. Good conversation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Steve.
Christian Hertenstein, Americans for Prosperity. We're going to have him back because I'm going to tell you how silly it is right here in Michigan. And you can talk to your elected officials and say, we need to get rid of these barriers to work. If these women want to braid hair and create a business and create economic activity, God bless them. We don't need more people on the system. We need more people going to work today than we did yesterday. That solves problems. 57 after on the Steve Gruber Show.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop.
Got it.
Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna I'll quit until it all comes out. Hey, boy. Long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical, it's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you. I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
All right, and welcome to it here on this Thursday. Thanks for stopping in. It's the Steve Gruber Show. You know, for half the morning here, I thought it was Friday. I don't know why I was in a time warp. I did. I thought it was Friday. Alex just broke the bad news to me. He came up from downstairs. He slapped me across the face. He said, "Good God, man, it's only Thursday." I wept like a child. I've barely been able to pull myself together. I thought the week was over. I don't know that I can make it. The finish line seems so far away. And then I realized, no, God, you're an American. Suck it up, Buttercup. You can do this. You work. It's what you do. You work. And then I got to thinking about all of this, which we do. And then I got to thinking about all of this welfare we've been talking about. And it reminded me of this point that, you know, the government to me is like a back alley dealer. The government peddling dependency on welfare programs that keep people hooked with almost no chance of ever breaking the cycle. The dependency, like any addiction, destroys self-esteem. It tears families apart. It victimizes children. It leaves hope in the gutter. And the junkies keep crawling back, begging for more at the feet of the ruling class and the government, just begging for their little handout. Because that's all they've got. They don't have hope. Human dignity is the first specific casualty of advanced socialism. When pride is destroyed, the masses are more easily molded to the visions of the elite and more easily create a foundation for the arrogance and the opulence in the halls of government and power. If the oligarchs drop just enough crumbs outside of the gates, and they can keep those gates closed to all but the very privileged, and that's true on all sides of the political world. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat, conservative or liberal. When you're in power, you want to stay there. And so then the dealers take to their podiums to demonize anyone who would challenge the system of oppression and dependence that they have created. Proselytizing from the throne of power, they decry any change, and any challenge is destructive to society and dangerous for the children. We must protect the children, they claim. We have to raise taxes. We have to protect the children from the evils of those that would demand more from them. And if ever you suggest maybe this isn't a good idea, maybe we shouldn't raise taxes, they will decry you. You will be demonized. They hate old people. They want to kill them. They want children to starve in the streets. You know, to save $5, they'd poison children. That's what they would do. That's what's wrong with these people. Do not stand with those devils. When really, those devils are trying to save you from the deadly dealer of dependency, the government. This steady march toward voluntary servitude continues to the precipice of full-on tyranny. Demands are handed down and echoed through the streets by the mouths of the indoctrinated. It is best for all if it is worst for me, is this mentality. It's nothing new. It's echoed through these lands and through different countries since the late 1800s. It manifested itself in the Bolshevik Revolution. It has been carried on by Chairman Mao and Joseph Stalin and the lovely Castro brothers just south of here. It's time to pull liberty from the swollen, muddy ditch before it is forgotten in the swamp of history. That's what I believe. It is Thursday here in the program. You're always welcome to call 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. As you know, Donald Trump stepped in it pretty good yesterday. He was, baited pretty well by Chris Matthews of MSNBC. But that's why would you ever go on that program? And why would you, when on that program, why would you entertain a conversation about abortion? Trump asked about if abortion were illegal and a woman got an abortion, would there be penalties? Should they be punished? And he thought about it. And, well, yeah, if it's illegal, you should be punished. Oh, my God, Donald Trump wants to punish women for abortion. Well, it was the question asked. Basically the question is, if you break the law, should there be a penalty? And his answer was, well, yeah, if you break the law, there should be a penalty. He's not advocating we should punish women for having abortions, but that's the way MSNBC, spins it out there. It's utterly stupid on his part to be on that program in the first place. Unless, of course, he thinks he can pick up Democrats by doing that. But all you're doing is tap dancing through the minefield. Seriously. You're tap dancing down a razor blade. It's like an inchworm on a razor blade. Think about that. That's what MSNBC is to anybody on the right. And certainly to Donald Trump, who is a firebrand. For him to go on Chris Matthews' show, whoever his campaign people are, they ought to be, questioned about their competence. Ought to be questioned about their competence. And there you go. So in the war on drugs, we have decided there is no war on drugs, and maybe that's a good thing. It depends on your point of view, I suppose. I think those sentenced to long prison terms for minor drug offenses are probably needlessly put away oftentimes, and it crowds our prison system, costs us a lot of money. The president thinks the same thing. Here's something you might actually agree with the man on. Obama commuted a whole lot of sentences yesterday for drug dealers. It's clip 4. Go.
As all of you know, it has been one of my top priorities for us to bring about a more sensible, more effective approach to our criminal justice system, particularly when it comes to drug crimes. And part of that has been to try to make sure that we have, on the front end, sensible sentencing, rehabilitation, education, and training in prison to prepare people so that they're not going back to the old mistakes that they made before. Part of it has been to really reinvigorate our commutations and pardons process because it is my strong belief that by exercising these presidential powers, I have the chance to show people what a second chance can look like, that I can highlight the individuals who are getting these second chances and doing extraordinary things with their lives.
There you have it. I don't know if they're doing extraordinary things, but at least, there you go. All right, 14 after. We're going to talk more about this coming up. And Hillary saying that the Republican candidates are all in over their heads. Well, maybe she can get a pardon before it's too late from the president, too. It's the Steve Gruber Show.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
I think I'm gonna be sad. I think it's today. Yeah. The girl that's driving me mad is going away.
All righty, welcome back to it. All right, so you heard about, I'm sure unless you live under a stone, you heard about the setup interview on MSNBC. And again, I have no idea what would possess Donald Trump to go on MSNBC and think that he would get anything but, one gotcha question after another loaded question. So he goes out there and Chris Matthews asks him and pins him down on this abortion thing, just won't leave it alone. And my opinion is this. Listen, I have my opinion about abortion, right? And you probably do as well. I rarely talk about it on the program because what's the point? It's been settled law since 1973, right or wrong, whether you like it or not. With the way the Supreme Court is, with the way the law was passed in Roe v. Wade. By the way, the woman that brought that suit is now pro-life, if you didn't know that. At any rate, that's the law of the land. There it is. Why argue about it? You win no points. It's a lose-lose, especially if you're a conservative Republican. You have no chance to gain any traction there. So he goes out there, and he's asked, well, if a woman gets an illegal abortion, or however it was phrased, should there be punishment? He thought about it and goes, well, yeah, she break the law. And Donald Trump wants to, punish women for having abortions. No, that's not what was said. It was just a total setup. Debbie Georgatos from Dallas-Fort Worth, an attorney, political strategist, and the host of the radio show Ladies Can We Talk, joining us now. It's been a while. Debbie, how have you been?
Very well. Good morning, Steve. Nice to be with you.
Glad to have you here. Okay, so first of all, why would he go on that program?
This is tied to why he gave that answer to start with. He's just politically naive and does not realize most of mainstream media will simply always work to set up a conservative to make them look bad. And I think, if you don't realize that going in, you think you just be your usual swaggering self, you're going to get caught.
Well, he does know the media's rotten. He says it all the time, and yet he did it anyway. And maybe he thinks that by going on there he can attract more Democratic voters. I don't think so, because the fact of the matter is most people will never see what was said on MSNBC. They will hear it from somebody else, or they'll read it on Facebook. Oh, my God, he said punish women for abortions? That's horrible. Nobody will ever actually see what the real context was. So they'll hang that around his neck and try to, and that's the game. Let's make no mistake. The game for George Soros and Hillary Clinton and then the people behind the anti-Trump rallies is to make him toxic, and it might be starting to work. What do you think?
I think it is, and this particular issue is just so hard for the GOP, as you were Steve saying just a few minutes ago. It's a very tough issue for the GOP. Very hard for GOP candidates to speak very much about abortion at all, and so to have this kind of hung over Trump's neck, and even though I did read that he, within a couple of hours, his campaign, Donald Trump's campaign, issued a statement saying, clarifying it really was a complete reversal. He said, people providing abortions that are not legal should be prosecuted, not the woman. So he tried to back off, but I thought that the statement by Senator Cruz captured the real lesson from this, which is this is just the latest demonstration of how little Donald has thought about major issues, because for the women's vote that's so hard for Trump to start with, he sends a further signal. He's just out of touch.
But Debbie, here's the problem. Ted Cruz can't win. So it doesn't, Ted Cruz can go out there and take his cheap shots and proselytize as he does. He can't win. So now what?
I don't agree with that assessment.
I know that, and I'm going to get a bunch of emails, and it doesn't matter. Ted Cruz does not have a path to 1,237 delegates. That's the way it is. He may get it in a contest. He may get a.
He has a. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say he might be able to get it in a contested convention, but Donald Trump is not suddenly going to leave the race. And unless Donald Trump leaves the race, Ted Cruz has no path to 1,237 delegates. You can tell me he does. He doesn't. And I don't have a horse in this race. I don't endorse Cruz. I don't endorse Trump. Kasich's a pain in my... anyhow, he does have no reason to be there. Cruz, mathematically, it's almost impossible. He has to get like 80% of the delegates going forward. It's not going to happen.
You know what, though? He has a path to preventing Donald Trump from getting 1,237 delegates. And I think that really is the game at this point, because if they get to that convention and Cruz has managed to perform well in these upcoming primaries and prevents Donald Trump from getting to that magic number of 1237, and so no one wins on the first ballot, then you get to this where it's maybe, and then I think the delegates will look at things like the trajectory, Cruz is doing better, Trump is doing worse.
Sure. And Ted Cruz has made so many friends along the way in the Republican Party, he should just cruise to a second or third ballot nomination. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Come on, Debbie. Come on, you're a smart lady. You're smart. You know better than that.
Actually, I will say this. I think the risk that the GOP or the RNC would take of trying to put someone in who was wasn't a candidate, whether it's Paul Ryan or whoever else you're talking about, that would be disastrous for the RNC. Mm-hmm. I think you see some of the GOP coming around to see Cruz as the lesser of two evils between him and Trump.
Yeah, and how many Democrats is Ted Cruz going to attract? Because you're going to have a few, like it or not. Ronald Reagan needed a bunch to win. Well, how many is Ted Cruz going to get? Let me help you with the math. 0.
Well, I will just say this. I think there are two very unpopular candidates on the Democrat side that are not going to be garnering the votes that they have in the past. I don't think Hillary's going to rival even Obama's outcome in the second time he ran in 2012. If Hillary isn't in jail and she is their candidate, she's not going to rally as many people. So it's a really tough race, because I think there are a lot of people in America who look at both parties and all the remaining candidates and just say, I just don't like any of them. But I agree with that.
I agree with that. But let's be honest. And trust me, I'm going to get a bunch of hate mail. You hate Ted Cruz and you're a Trump guy. Listen, I'm going to support whoever the Republicans put up because I think Hillary Clinton is a criminal at large. I do. And I think that she has a long track record of manipulation. You know, she's worth tens of millions of dollars while decrying people that make tens of millions of dollars, whatever. She's a complete hypocrite, and I would never vote for her under any circumstances. However, I don't think that Ted Cruz has a path to the nomination. I don't think he's well-liked. I think Donald Trump is deeply flawed, obviously, by yesterday's performance. But at the end of the day, I don't know who comes out on top, and I don't think you win by putting up somebody at a convention that comes out of wherever. We'll see. I'll give you 20 seconds for the last word, Debbie.
I think the folks in this race who are watching closely the GOP on the GOP side are getting concerned that Donald Trump simply can never win against Hillary Clinton. So you got to get behind Cruz, whether he's your favorite guy or not.
That's a nice pitch. I'll give you that. Debbie, always a pleasure.
Great talking to you.
There you have it. Steve Gruber Show on a Thursday. Back in a moment.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
.33 after on this Thursday. Just perusing an article from Chicago Trib here. Basically, it just outlines how Hillary Clinton's campaign is basically telling the Bernie folks, just sit down and shush. We've got this. Yeah, dismissing, we know that it's been fairly rigged from the beginning, the superdelegates and so forth. Bernie, by the way, has won 5 out of the last 6 contests. Yeah, and the Clinton campaign, just shush. Just sit down, be still. We've got this. We're in charge here. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, you've got Donald Trump voluntarily going into an interview at MSNBC. I don't know who thought this was a good idea. I mean, if you didn't expect gotcha questions, you obviously haven't been paying very close attention. But still today, if I were to say who's most likely to be on top when it's all done, Hillary for sure. Trump, good possibility, I would say. Michael Barone here from Fox News and the Washington Examiner. Michael, welcome back to the program.
Hey, nice to be with you.
So, I mean, Donald Trump's faux pas yesterday, I mean, that was, that's what we call an unforced error, I think, to walk into that arena and expect to get, even-handed treatment. And to get in the conversation about abortion, how do you, there's nothing to win here, my advice. You have nothing to win, and yet there he goes anyway.
Well, it's, it raised the question in the minds of some whether Donald Trump really, A, expected to win, and B, wants to win, and C, wants to do the actual work of being president. He clearly doesn't show much acquaintance, knowledge, or understanding of foreign policy, except for, instincts that are built on watching some television news programs. And he doesn't know really the first thing about abortion, which is that when we had criminal abortion laws in this country more than 40 years ago, the prosecutions were all of doctors who performed the abortion and none of women who did it, who, were the mothers or, would have been mothers. He just did. There's a pretty high ignorance quotient going on with Donald Trump, and it becomes apparent whenever he's interviewed. We saw some of the same thing in the CNN town hall in Wisconsin this week. We saw it if you read the transcripts of his interviews with the New York Times editorial page or reporters and Washington Post reporters, where he's asked, in many cases, legitimate questions, and he clearly doesn't have any idea what the facts are.
And yet here where I am in Michigan, a lot of blue-collar workers, a lot of long-term hardcore Democrats, lifelong Democrats, people calling me saying, I can't vote for Hillary Clinton. It can't happen. I won't do it. I can't vote for her. So she has a whole set of problems of her own, even with her own base, whether they care to acknowledge it or not. But I can guarantee you, in General Motors country here in southern Michigan, she is not loved. She is not even liked in most circles and people that are supposed to support her. And one of the big reasons being her push against gun ownership and so forth. That doesn't sit well with people that work on, the General Motors assembly line, for example.
Well, if you, I think you've got an excellent point there. If you look at the Democratic primary results in terms of counties carried, once you get outside the South and outside the parts of the South where you have black majorities, which Hillary Clinton carried with 80-some% voters in the South. Many counties that Hillary Clinton carried, it's mainly a sea of Bernie Sanders green and not Hillary Clinton red, to use the color scheme that one of the websites that I frequently look at. And I think you're talking about gun control is exactly right. I mean, Hillary seized on the gun control issue because it's one of the few issues on which her record is the left of Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders comes from Vermont, where people are proud that they've never had any gun control laws at the state level in Vermont. You want a gun, you can have a gun. And he had a voting record that was sometimes respectful of this background. And she sort of assumed that Democratic primary voters everywhere were all in line with that. And
clearly
wasn't the case. Yeah, and
clearly they are not.
Yeah, clearly, great majority of counties in Michigan were carried by Bernie Sanders, and he carried the state as a whole because black voters, instead of voting 88-11 for Hillary Clinton over Sanders, as they did in Mississippi on the same day, voted about 65-30 for her, a margin, but not enough to enable her to carry the state.
So here's my here's my observation over my time, and you're probably the same for you. Michael Barone on the line, by the way, from Fox News and Washington Examiner. And my observation is this, Michael, and here's where the American voter has a problem. American voters, historically speaking, like to vote for somebody they actually kind of like. They want to vote for somebody they actually like. They don't like Hillary Clinton. They don't like Donald Trump. They don't like Ted Cruz. Bernie, they kind of like him, but they realize that they're smart enough to realize, by and large, that, come on, everything can't all be free. And so they get that. But that leaves them with a very difficult situation. I mean, maybe Richard Nixon wasn't liked, but he was the only president in my lifetime I can think people didn't really like. Generally, they liked Ronald Reagan. They liked George Bush. They liked Bill Clinton. They liked these people, whether they liked their politics or not.
Likability is not Hillary Clinton's strong suit, and it's not Donald Trump's either. I mean, when you look at the faved, unfaved, as we in the pundit business call it, the ratings of favorables and unfavorables.
Yes.
Balance is negative for both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. You've got over 60% of people that qualify as general election voters through poster screens saying they have unfavorable feelings about Donald Trump. You have about 56% saying they have unfavorable feelings about Hillary Clinton, and you've got even larger percentage, over 60%, typically saying that she is not honest and trustworthy.
Yeah.
Well, it's you wouldn't buy an auto insurance policy from her. Why do you want her to be president?
Well, exactly, and that's the point. So, all right, so and she's most likely, unless there's something unusual, an indictment, which I don't think most people think is going to happen, whether it's deserved or not. I don't think that's going to happen. So that leaves us with the Republican question. You've got Trump that looks like he will probably come up short. He's running behind in Wisconsin, so that's going to slow him down in getting the delegates he needs, which brings you to a contested convention, which is messy. And is there anybody that comes to mind for you, Michael, that the Republicans could put up and say, this is somebody that can win? Because for me, I look at him and go, you're not going to put up Cruz or Kasich. It's not going to happen. And then who do you go to?
Well, the answer is, I think that in all likelihood, if Donald Trump comes visibly short of getting the 1,237 delegate majority, I think the nominee will be Ted Cruz. Because if he comes visibly short, it will be because Cruz has been winning delegates. As you point out, the recent Marquette University poll in Wisconsin, for example, had Cruz ahead of Trump 40-30. Trump's been polling at 30 in Wisconsin ever since in such polling as there's been since he got into the race, and he hasn't gotten above it. And in one of my Washington Examiner columns, I made the observation, or advanced the working hypothesis, that support and opposition to Trump are correlated with degrees of social connectedness. The term of Robert Putnam, the sociologist Charles Murray. How many friends do you have? How many voluntary organizations do you have? How much civic engagement do you have? Do you have involvement in church on a regular basis and so forth? Wisconsin rates high in social connectedness. Well, Trump does badly in states where there's high social connectedness. It's highest in states with German and Scandinavian heritage to their
Michael, we're going to have to
population.
leave it right there. I'm sorry, Michael Barone. Thank you very much, but we got to drop it right there.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
Who leads a life of danger. To everyone he meets, he stays.
All right, welcome back to it on this Thursday. I don't know if Michael Barone's right about that or not. We'll debate that going forward. But Ted Cruz has an awfully uphill climb. I'll just say that. We'll leave it at that. Our next guest, good friend of the program, Liz Peek, columnist also at Fox News and the Fiscal Times. Liz, welcome back to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
We're actually going to talk about something different today. Isn't it exciting?
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah, we're going to talk about iPhones because this whole thing, because I'm looking at an article posted on Fox News, actually, that the FBI has now agreed to unlock an iPhone and an iPod in an Arkansas homicide case. They just made this decision yesterday. And so here we are. The FBI now knows how to get into them. And magically, gosh, we're only going to do it once in a while, except we're going to do it here and here. And I don't like this a bit. I don't like the fact that they have keys to my phone, basically.
Well, all right, so what's the line in the sand here? The line is that in a case where there has been a subpoena issued allowing law enforcement to crack into these communications, that's what's happening. This is not the NSA, Edward Snowden, mass surveillance that basically didn't require anyone's okay and went ahead on millions of people without anyone's awareness. These are law enforcement cases where they have been allowed to go in and look for information. And sort of stepping out of the tech bubble for a moment, let's remember that all of your letters, your files, your communications, telephone calls, all those things are open to scrutiny if you commit a crime. In other words, a subpoena
No, I understand that.
Can have cops come in and raid your office, raid your desk, go after everything. So, to those of us not in the tech world, I think one question is, what's so big a deal about your emails or about your cell phone? And my point in writing this article is that this has become sort of, Apple versus big government. No, it's Apple versus the FBI and law enforcement. And most Americans come down on the side of law enforcement. If this is information the FBI needs to pursue a case, certainly against terrorists, or in the cases you're talking about, homicides, why should they not have that access? And
I'm glad you asked. I'm glad because here's what chills. Here was the line that caught my attention, that gave a chill up my spine when hearing Barack Obama talk about this a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about crime and this, and then he said, for the pursuit of, he made a comment about taxes and pursuing taxes, and that you are carrying a Swiss bank account in your pocket. It's about taxes. It's about financial information. It's about the government figuring out how they can tax us more and get access to my financial records once again. That's what he was focused on. He didn't care about the terrorists. He cared about me having a Swiss bank account in my pocket.
Well, that is an entirely different information base that they might or might not access once they're inside your cell phone. What you're reflecting is a sort of profound distrust of the government. I think that's an entirely different issue.
I've sought treatment, but it doesn't seem to work. I do have a profound distrust of the government.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, that is at the heart, maybe, really, of why Apple felt that it was a good public relations move. And I would put this stance of theirs in that category to kind of confront the government, stand up to the government. My point in writing this article is I think they have a double whammy here. I mean, not only, guess what, does it turn out that standing up to the government didn't mean anything because it turns out their iPhones really are not secure. So how does that make us feel about Apple products? But also they look like they're unpatriotic. They weren't helping the FBI in this investigation, which most Americans think we needed them to help with. That we needed the information that might lead to other radicalized ISIS wannabes in the country. So I think the pursuit was legitimate. I think that Apple refusing the FBI request was illegitimate. And I think at the end of the day, again, now the big issue is, of course, is the FBI going to help Apple figure out how the FBI got into their iPhone.
Here's what we learned. Here's what we learned about that, Liz, in my opinion. We learned once again that the Israeli military is the smartest group of people collected in one place on the planet, period.
That's right.
Oh, my God. Who got in? The Israelis got in. Of course they did. Of course it was the Israelis that figured it out. Why wouldn't it be?
I think that's probably exactly right. And so, again, how does that leave you feeling about Apple? I mean, it seems to me like their engineers couldn't figure this out. Are you kidding me? So I just think they're sort of the double loser here.
Well, I think the person that finished first in the class went to Mossad, and the person that finished second in the class went to Apple. That's just my feeling, because that's pretty impressive. I mean, let's be honest, that's impressive. So here's the question going forward, though. During this conversation, there was discussion of whether Apple would change its operating system going forward to make it stronger or potentially weaker, so the government could have access. What's going to happen now when they go forward? Are they going to make the operating system make it harder to access, or are they going to give the government a way in?
Oh, I think they have to make it harder to access, because that's been their whole selling pitch on this. That, we're protecting our customer privacy. I don't know if you had a chance to read Tim Cook's open letter to customers, but it was very sort of, I won't use the word sanctimonious, but it was very self-congratulatory about, our main thing is standing up for our customer security. Well, oops. What happened to the customer security? So I think they have to make it tougher going forward. But guess what? All of this stuff is open to hacking. I mean, like you're, profoundly distrustful of the government. I am convinced that every one of these technology devices is crackable, and I think it will be. Yeah,
I think you have to. It used to be don't write anything down unless you want it read. Basically, don't write anything anywhere ever that you don't expect somebody to read at some point, and that's just the way it is. And and know that if you put something down on your iPhone or on your computer anywhere, somebody could see it at some point, Liz. I think that's the lesson. Mm-hmm.
Just ask Hillary Clinton or Petraeus or any of the. I mean, honestly, it's amazing to me how people in positions of authority still think you can erase an email and it disappears. It never disappears. No. And by the way, if someone wants to look at your stuff, it's always going to happen.
You know what? It's going to be part of your permanent record, mister, so you better behave yourself. Liz,
and look, we went a whole 10 minutes not talking about Donald Trump. This is an extraordinary accomplishment.
I agree. Liz Peek, always a pleasure.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me, gonna quit until it all comes out. Hey, boy, been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical, it's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
And welcome to it, my friends. It's the Steve Gruber Show on a Thursday. On a Thursday. You're always welcome to jump on board and ask a few questions if you'd like. 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. This part of the program brought to you by the Michigan 529 programs, making sure your kids and grandkids get the education they need. To learn more, go to SaveWithMI529.com. That's SaveWithMI529.com. It's Thursday, and that means that our good friend Congressman Tim Walberg is here with us. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Good to be back with you.
I understand that you have two big veterans fairs coming up, and I figure we talk about this first. We got lots to talk about, but let's talk about the veterans and what's going on here in southern Michigan, because these sorts of events are going on in different places. But let's start with that, sir.
Yeah, we always are attempting to provide services. This week we did a senior fair in Adrian. We'll be doing in Washtenaw County a veterans fair. And you're going to have to help me with a date here. Let's make sure I give the right one.
Yeah, no, I got the dates here. Let's see. The first one is tomorrow, Friday. That is in Jackson County Veterans Claims Fair, Friday, April 1st from 9 until 1. the Washtenaw County Veterans Fair on Monday, April 4th, 10 until noon. No problem. Here to help you, Congressman.
I appreciate that. Just kind of keeping track of the schedule. We do it one day at a time. But,
no, I understand.
The Washtenaw County Veterans Fair, privileged to work with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell on that one. It's combined. We share parts of Washtenaw County, and so these are events that we bring in the various groups, organizations that have outreach to veterans that deal with the records. Of course, we have the VA there as well, dealing with health care as well as the general record-keeping administration of the Veterans Program. And then job training programs, housing programs, all of the rest. So if you're a veteran or a family member of a veteran that would like to get some information for a veteran or a friend, it is open and available to you. And again, I think we've learned through the course of this long war on terror that continues on that there are veterans issues that we've let kind of fall behind, either in the resources that we make available to them financially and otherwise, counseling services, but generally how we can cut some of the unnecessary red tape and burden that they have to go through at times. That it's really frustrating to a guy like me to hear it, but to them that have to go through it, it's very difficult. So always looking for a better way of handling it, and I think we're coming up with some ideas that veterans now are a bit more open to.
All right, so I see your name pop up a lot these days, shifting gears now, and when it comes to people that should be concerned if Donald Trump is at the head of the Republican ticket, saying that people in closely contested districts, and yours is brought up oftentimes, might pay a price, if you will, for Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, and it could cost you votes, is what they say. How do you address a close race like this? I mean, you obviously have no control as to who ends up on top of the ticket. What do you do about such things?
Well, I think it's all my responsibility to make sure that the people that are in the 7th District understand where I'm coming from, understand the principles upon which I will represent them. We've been fairly clear on that for all the time that I've been here. And it's responsibility for me to get out and let people have a chance to ask me those questions that are most important to them, hear my responses, and then determine. I can't go around and mope about who might be at the top of the ticket, or even if I'm excited with who ends up to being at the top of the ticket, it's still my responsibility to show the voters of the 7th District that I'm one that should be representing them. So that's why we do a lot of town halls. I'll be heading out to Salem Township shortly here. We do a town hall at 9:30, and again, another opportunity for people to hear. But they need to know that I care. They need to know that I understand the principles of limited government that our Constitution establishes, and I'm willing to put myself in line with those principles, and then to communicate to them the issues that are of greatest concern to them, and show that I'm willing to work. That's what I have to do. I can't I can't fault Donald Trump or Ted Cruz or anybody else, and I can't run necessarily on their coattails. If they have some, that's great, but otherwise, people need to want to come to the polls for this race for me as well.
Well, then let's look at the things that voters are looking at this year. And we'll get back to the, I don't know what you call it, the circus of the Donald Trump campaign yesterday going on MSNBC. I mean, I don't know who thought that was a good idea in the first place, but there you have it. And then getting pinned into a conversation about abortion, which I think has a no-win for a Republican. In my estimation, I have my strong opinions about abortion, but I rarely discuss it on this program because, listen, the way the Supreme Court is and the way the law stands today, it's not likely to change. There's not much I can do about it, and there's almost no upside for a Republican or a conservative candidate to talk about it in an election. What do you stand to gain by having that conversation? Well, I think you talk to the people about what they're most interested in. And certainly my district is a strongly pro-life district. They want to know that I'm pro-life, that I've stood 100% in defense of life from conception to natural death. I stand on the Constitution and even further than that, back to the Declaration of Independence. It talked about
we all are endowed with certain inalienable rights, and those being the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So when that's an issue to talk about, I'm certainly not going to stand behind. But there are plenty of issues out there that people need to know. And first and foremost, they need to know that they will be treated equally under the law. The Constitution will be the guide so that the playing field is level for everyone, and that they have opportunity unencumbered as much as possible by unnecessary government bureaucracy, etc. And so those are the issues of huge concern. Spoke in a group last night, and that was their concern about the impact of regulation on their industries, specifically in the area of real estate, and then developing the opportunity for people to have that American dream beginning with a home, and the impact that there is in that industry coming from some crazy regulations that this president is pushing forward right now at the end of his term, and will have huge impact on discouraging people from having advancement in their jobs and security of opportunity in their jobs to have a standard of living that brings them to the middle class and gives them further choices in the future. So those are all issues that we need to talk to with the various constituencies out there, and it's a beautiful thing when you look at America and a district like mine that is a patchwork of all sorts of ideas, desires, and dreams, and this country should be a place where people can achieve those.
All right, hold that thought right there, because I'm going to have some specific questions about how we save some money going forward. We're with Congressman Tim Walberg here on the Steve Gruber Show on a Thursday. Back in a moment.
Steve Gruber Show.
All right, welcome to it. Back with Congressman Walberg now. Back with Congressman Walberg. And as Congressman, as we look at the possibility that in just a couple of years we will be back to trillion-dollar annual deficits in America, despite that doesn't matter seem to who we vote for, back to trillion-dollar deficits on the horizon and no end in sight. Where can we do something about this? Where can we save money? Where can we cut back? Where can we get our spending under control?
Well, in the multi-trillion-dollar budget that we have in the federal government, there have to be dollars. I think any legitimate, common-sense thinking person could have to conclude that we're spending too much on all different things that aren't necessarily part of the requirements in the Constitution for the federal government. They ought to be back at state levels and expended more efficiently in that way. So anybody who says to me, hey, you got to increase taxes and increase spending, that's absolutely absurd. We can look in entire departments and see agencies that are using their resources wrongly. Look at the EPA. The ability of the EPA to say we need to get into regulating farm puddles, literally farm puddles, and drainage ditches when they missed what was happening in Flint and other cities around the country, and the waste of resources going there, we ought to be able to find it. That's the process right now that we're pushing forward in the budget, and the debate comes from the Senate Democrats, especially because they have the power to hold it up. You can't move back to the 1067 plan that was put in place in Ryan Murray that put us on balanced budget for 4 years in a row and moving back toward a total balanced budget in a 10-year cycle. We did that by saying no to the president on sequestration. If you're going to threaten that and shut down, so okay, go have at it. Well, by doing that, we got ourselves to $450 billion of deficit last year. That was a reduction over half of what it had been on average prior to the Republicans take control of the House in 2010. That's a constant challenge, and when you have a mandatory spending budget now, that's 53% of our whole budget, and discretionary is less than half of the budget. We have to find ways of forcing this president and subsequently the next president.
Well, yeah, we can't do much with this president. It's over.
Repealer bills.
But here's the problem. You look at the Republicans, including yourself, won big in 2014. You have control of the purse strings, as the Congress does, and yet the American people look, and right or wrong, here's what they see. They see things going through pretty much the way they were before, and that's really what they believe. That's what they believe. They see the money continues to be spent. Obamacare is funded. Everything continues to go on day after day, week after week, with no change in sight, and we're still in this big hole financially.
Well, that's the beauty of programs like this. It gives an opportunity to get the truth out. That folks, you're right. We are still spending too much, but there has been a difference. For instance, on the issue of Obamacare, people need to know that Obamacare is a mandatory entitlement program spending. What does that mean? That means until we do away with the program itself, we repeal the law, it has to be spent upon. Have we increased the spending for Obamacare? No. That's been the encouraging thing in using the power of the purse, that we've not increased the dollars to Obamacare. But until we can repeal Obamacare, it is mandatory, just like Social Security, just like Medicare, just like Medicaid. Those are mandatory items. That's where it takes the will of the people to not get buffaloed and say it doesn't make any difference, and not select a president this next time who will sign repealers of abusive programs like that are costing not only dollars, but costing medical care to the people of the United States. And that's the battle that will go on. So I'm delighted to have the opportunity to tell things like that. But on the other side of the ledger, we're the first Congress since the Korean War that has back-to-back 6 years in a row now reductions year over year in discretionary spending, and 2 years in a row, first time since the Korean War Congress, that we've done overall total budgetary reductions year over year. That's got to continue.
It's got to continue, but the problem is, but it doesn't continue because, then the next person, because, we can look at Social Security, for example, which the problems with that predate you, but, there's basically $2.5 trillion that were paid in by American taxpayers for the Social Security insurance program. It's not there. Mm-hmm. It's just simply not there. Yeah. Just the American people were robbed by trusting politicians.
Oh, yeah. And a bill that I've introduced, co-sponsored several years now, that does not make it through the Senate, that would put a lockbox on Social Security saying Social Security dollars can only be used for Social Security and Medicare, nothing more, nothing less. That's the type of stuff that means that we need to continue. The conservative listeners that are listening to your show need to not get buffaloed in thinking that all is lost and it makes no difference. It does make a difference. If that bill of mine could get through the Senate past the filibuster of Harry Reid and a president would sign it, we would have that lockbox. But more importantly, we'd put ourselves on track to fix Social Security for future generations by finding a better approach to it, but keeping the promise to present Social Security recipients and soon to be, myself included, as Social Security recipients, because it has been a promise made and it better be a promise kept. But if we keep on this track, our younger employees that are coming into the workforce or aren't even in yet will not have anything to show for themselves when they come to the point of time in my life that I'm experiencing right now, with no opportunity to save. So it is a continued due diligence that we must do. The price of liberty is eternal vigilance, Jefferson said, and he's absolutely right.
25 after on this Thursday. Congressman Walberg, thank you.
Hey, it is still an opportunity in this country. Let's move forward.
There you have it. Congressman Tim Walberg here on the Steve Gruber Show Thursday edition. The phone number, 888-900-9966. We'll be right back.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
All right, welcome back to it. Earlier today, I thought it was Friday for the first hour of the day today. I've been recovering from that ever since. Trying to recover from that. Just hoping that, it was Friday, but it's not, and so I have to struggle through. I have to make the finish line. You've had that happen. Gosh, I almost didn't even realize. Oh, Yeah, that makes it a little bit tougher. Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz counting on the Wisconsin primary coming up Tuesday to reinvigorate his aspirations of winning the Republican crown as the nominee of the party for the 2016 run for president. It's extremely important. Right now, the latest polls show Cruz with a sizable lead in Wisconsin. In fact, running ahead by about 10 points. With Donald Trump in second, John Kasich, who shouldn't be in the race at all, running third. But I think it's 40-30-21 for Kasich, running all the way back. And Cruz took aim at the president's foreign policy in the wake of the Brussels terror attacks that left 350, maimed or murdered, and saying the United States needs to be a commander-in-chief who will lead. And one of the things that he suggested that got a lot of blowback was monitoring mosques in America, monitoring, Muslims here in America much closer, putting them under a microscope, if you will. Our next guest, Larry Pratt, the Executive Director of Gun Owners of America, doesn't disagree. Larry, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Glad to have you back. So do you believe Ted Cruz is right about this?
Well, there's certainly precedent for it. When the mafia was being battled years ago, that's one of the things that was done. You go to where they might be living to pick up the leads that you can use to break off their activity. And if you're not going to do that, then we're going to, I think, have to realize that we're going to be experiencing the same kinds of things that they have in Europe. And I don't think most Americans want that.
No, I don't think most Americans want that, but there has been tremendous pushback, as you well know, about the suggestion of monitoring mosques. Now, in days of old, J. Edgar Hoover, if this was going on in his time, he would have just done it. He wouldn't have asked permission. He'd be out there spying on whoever he felt he needed to spy on. And I think probably some government agencies do it anyway. But when it gets for public consumption, that all changes, of course. And how far do you think we should go, Larry, in looking at, mosques or whatever else might you might feel would reveal information that would protect us from terrorists?
Well, I think it's entirely possible. If not, then you haven't done any harm. But the fact that that's a likely place for trouble to emanate, in fact, we know that has already been the case, that some of the shooters have gotten radicalized. Sometimes it's online, so it's not necessarily a physical place, but you do what you can do.
So what about the people that say you can't come spy on me, you can't come look at me? What do you say to those concerns?
Well, if they're involved in with a group of Muslims, where all of the terrorists that have committed acts of terror have been Muslim, and I think we would be very, very derelict and very remiss to say, "Oh well, that's just a coincidence," and we're not going to look where the trouble is most likely to be coming from. We're kind of in a war. This is a religion that wants to destroy everybody that's not like it. That's what the Quran plainly teaches. Go kill unbelievers. Direct orders in the Quran. And so if somebody's going to take the Quran seriously, literally, we got trouble.
Well, and if you say that in the light of day like you do here, clearly then you're called xenophobic, you're called a racist. The Quran says what it says, and yet you're held to account and you're labeled by the left, who call you an extremist or whatever they might say. And that also makes it difficult to fight some of these threats, because when you're being labeled and marginalized, and let's be honest, most people in the country don't take time to read much more than a headline. So they see a headline, oh, that must be true. They don't read the story and realize there's more to the story than a headline, and then therefore you get marginalized, and people say, well, you're Islamophobic, whatever that means. And so how do we conduct ourselves in that atmosphere?
Well, the label racist is particularly interesting because Islam is not a race. People of all different races subscribe to the religion of Islam. and its political teachings. So I think it reflects a lack of understanding on the part of those who are critical. They haven't really been willing to come to grips and admit the Quran teaches hate. The Quran teaches genocide. And we'd better not kid ourselves much longer, or what's happening in Europe is going to be happening to us.
And the thing is, I don't think anybody would be surprised by that, but we're with Larry Pratt from Gun Owners of America here on the program. But at a time, and I think there's truth to what you said, and I think it's the same reason that Thomas Jefferson went to Tripoli. He read the Quran and decided you couldn't negotiate with these people. You had to go kill them to stop what they were doing.
The story goes that he had asked the Barbary Pirates ambassador in London, why are you attacking our shipping all the time? Why are you taking captive and killing our seamen? And the answer came back, well, we're doing what our holy book says.
Yeah, we're doing what we have a right to. But by the way, if you give us $250,000, we might back off for a while. That's
right.
Yeah,
that's also in the Quran.
Right, and he said, no, I don't think so. So he went and built a navy that he didn't intend to originally, and he went and killed them. And it took many years, but he went and fought.
By the way, that's how our Marine Corps really got started. From the to the shores of Tripoli. Well, that's over in that part of the world.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It was one of the Barbary states of the Ottoman Empire. That's exactly right about as far as your point goes there. But I find it interesting at this time and in this point in the discussion that Hillary Clinton continues to push her narrative of we need stronger gun control, we need to take guns away from people, so on and so forth. It continues. She likes the idea of an Australian-type gun buyback, which is a confiscation program, but a gun buyback program being touted recently again by Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and the cries for gun control follow the most recent bombings. There's a disconnect in the mind of many of the anti-gunners, and it goes back a long time, probably pushing 40 years ago. There was a Mayor Dinkins of New York who responded to the fatal knifing of a Utah tourist in the subway system by having a news conference the very next day saying, well, this shows that we need more gun control.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you can't fix certain things, Larry. Larry Pratt, I greatly appreciate
it. They don't believe in self-defense. Arguably, if the Utah tourist had had access to a gun, might not have been killed.
No, there's no question about that. Larry Pratt, always a pleasure.
We're at gunowners.org for those that like to get on our email list. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Gunowners.org. There it is. Larry Pratt, Executive Director of Gun Owners of America. Back in a moment with one of our favorites, Megan Barth, on the program. Sit tight.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
Danger, danger, the queen's about to kill. There's a stranger.
I think that works, Alex. I like that. Yeah, that works. Megan needs a theme song anyway, so there you go. Megan Barth from ReaganBaby.com, one of my favorites, back here on the program again. Megan, welcome to it.
Well, thank you. Is that Judas Priest?
I believe it is, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. In fact, if I had, long hair still, I have plenty of hair, make no mistake, but if I had long hair, I'd be whipping it around the studio right now.
Oh, boy. Boy.
So we got a couple of things to talk about here, two big Donald Trump stories, and start where you want. And to find out more about what you're writing, ReaganBaby.com is the place to set your sights on. First of all, I don't know where to start, but we're going to start. How about Michelle Fields in her own words, her field of dream? I've looked at this video. I don't understand where there's a crime. I mean, I've been around presidential candidates, Secret Service, all of this stuff. The guy touched her arm to slow her down to get out of the candidate's face. What I missed it, I guess.
Look at it this way. If Michelle Fields was a credible threat, Corey Lewandowski could have ended up like James Brady. Corey Lewandowski did not know her. She was continually touching his boss, which you don't do, especially a boss that's protected by Secret Service. And she was holding something in her hand. So as an objective person, which I am, although I hold a bias, I am objective first, I watched that tape, probably more than the Zapruder film. And in her own words, she was jolted backwards. He yanked her down. She almost fell to the ground. He aggressively tried to pull me to the ground. Campaign managers aren't supposed to try to forcefully throw reporters to the ground.
Okay, I didn't see anything that even remotely approached. In fact, that's not even accurate in any way, in any semblance. Am I right or wrong?
No, you are right. Not once in the tape is she jolted backwards or yanked down.
She barely got touched. I mean, all he did, from what and Ivy and I talked about this because I said, well, I wanted her to watch it. Does this woman? She goes, what am I supposed to be seeing? She's like, what am I supposed to see here?
As
she
he touches her arm, she barely even breaks her stride in her request to report the news.
Mm-hmm.
So on my latest post on Reagan Baby, I call it Michelle's Field of Dreams.
Correct.
And is this some sort of new conservative fascism whereby there's this conservative movement which is creating blacklists for anybody that doesn't agree with them and their candidate? We have a bunch of journalists, a bunch of women who signed a statement demanding that Donald Trump fire Corey Lewandowski before any due process and before he's heard in his court in a court of law. So this new conservatism reveres the likes of Liz Mayer and Rick Wilson, who employ fascist tactics and Alinskyite rules to smear a capitalist, his wife, his supporters. Other conservatives side with violent leftist mobs instead of championing the First Amendment. And now they're denouncing due process in order to provide a safe space for a prima donna like Michelle Fields. Count me out of this conservative movement.
It's crazy and it's insanity. But I have to make sure I get into the next question that I have for you. And Michelle Fields, to me, I've watched it. There's no credibility here, but I can't believe that anybody filed any crime or filed any charge. That's what I find bizarre, right? That any charges were filed, even though it's a misdemeanor for whatever it was. It'll get thrown out. But in the meantime, whatever. In the meantime, though, it's just another way to smear the Trump campaign, right? And then, but yesterday was a self-inflicted injury. Why on earth would any candidate that is on the Republican side sit down voluntarily with Chris Matthews in a situation where you know it's going to be gotcha politics with a setup question, and put yourself through that because the only headline that most people are going to read is Donald Trump wants punishment for women who get abortions. Not what he said.
Right.
But that's what they'll read.
Really? Okay. What happened now? I mean, watching this news cycle, if you're not watching it every single minute of the day, because he's so widely covered, you're always going to get a soundbite. But, this is one of Donald Trump's, what I would call a Mr. Smith goes to Washington, right? The guy's not a politician. The guy doesn't necessarily understand the poison which exists within political journalism, who these journalists who claim to not be biased, but yet hold and propagate their biases up by outwardly supporting candidates and parties. So Donald Trump, sure. Okay, did he get caught up? Yeah. Did he say something he didn't mean? Yeah. Did he walk it back an hour later? Yes. So that would count as a mistake. Are we all not allowed to make mistakes or misspeak anymore in this 24-hour news cycle of gotcha journalism?
Exactly. You've got it. Unless, here's the point. Soros wants to make Trump toxic. He's spending millions of dollars to create, a fake riots at his events. He's spending millions of dollars to set up a situation to turn Trump toxic at the behest of Hillary Clinton. And I truly believe that. I've read a ton here. I don't think it's Bernie supporters showing up at the Trump events. I think it's Hillary supporters and George Soros people that are being, financially supported in one way or the other to be there. I mean, look at the facts. But it's starting to work, I think, Megan. I think they're starting to get some things that this might stick to Trump because, again, these people only read headlines. They don't read the story. They don't have any idea.
Well, and don't you find it coincidental that right after 54 jets were found parked on an island off of Georgia, which were comprised of Republican senatorial leaders, consultants like Karl Rove, and moguls from the tech industry and music industry conspiring. The whole goal was to conspire against Donald Trump. 54 private jets against one capitalist with one private jet. And then Chicago happened.
And on and on and on. ReaganBaby.com, the place to find it with Megan Barth. Megan, it's always a pleasure.
Thanks. Come back to Reagan Baby, right?
No, I don't worry. I've just I'm creating a news network. I'll tell you all about it next time we talk. 52
Yay.
after.